Welcome, students, to the Enlightenment section of our notes. This is for world history. Let's begin. Enlightenment, the beginnings. So due to the scientific revolution that we looked at, many people started to look to reason and thought to solve problems, instead of just believing things to be so because God said so or because it's traditionally believed. They wanted to know the reason behind everything, and they believed that that thought process could solve all problems. Philosophers started to begin to rethink the rights and liberties of citizens. And so the Enlightenment is a focus on the citizens, the people, their rights, their liberties. You don't need to write this down, but this would begin in Western Europe, in areas such as England and France in the 17th and 18th century. Again, remember that when we say century, that is the time beforehand. So it would be 1600s and 1700s, 17th and 18th century. And if 1700s rings a bell with the American Revolution, you would be right. The Enlightenment is going to inspire much of the American Revolution. The first Enlightenment thinker will be kind of an old school thinker by the name of Thomas Hobbes. In his book, The Leviathan, he's going to argue the need for absolute monarchs to keep order. Most of the Enlightenment thinkers are going to resist against the idea that absolute monarchs, absolute kings are a good thing because they want to protect the rights of the people. But Thomas Hobbes actually believed that the rights of the people were protected with absolute monarchs. Thomas Hobbes is one of those who believed that freedom was a terrible thing, that people live in fear and people live in dread when there is freedom. So he believed that strong law enforcement, strong kings made people obey the rules. For example, seatbelt laws. The reason that most of us wear our seatbelt is because we don't want to get a ticket, not because we think we're going to die. And so the police has to act as this leviathan or this absolute monarch to serve tickets to keep people in line. They take away people's freedom in order to protect them because people generally don't think about the need for protection until it's too late. Picture of Thomas Hobbes there, kind of old school guy. Then we have other people. Most famous would be John Locke. John Locke believed that man is born with inalienable rights, the idea of life, liberty, and property. The way that I remember John Locke is that he's all locked up and he wants life, liberty, and property. You don't need to write down the book that he writes, but his two treatises of government presents a differing view of Hobbes. So John Locke and Thomas Hobbes would be at odds with one another in the best way to protect the rights of the people. You have to remember that Thomas Hobbes, he was an Enlightenment philosopher during the English Civil War. So he had more of a cynical view versus John Locke, who was born afterwards, would have more of a positive view. Individuals have the right to rebel if rights are not protected. And so this Enlightenment philosophy will sow the seeds for rebellion and revolutions. Hobbes and Locke suggested a social contract or agreement with the government existed. Hobbes believed that the government was at the top and the people were at the bottom, but there was a social contract that existed. Locke would turn that the government and the people are equal, that the government is the people. And so there's that social contract that exists, that the government will protect the rights of the people, but the people will also obey the government until that social contract is broken, then revolution. Main ideas. The philosophers believed religion halted human progress. Again, the old school way of religion was that you obeyed the church's teachings, you didn't question anything, which is actually not what the Bible does teach that questioning is good, that to have a relationship with God, you need to talk to God. You need to question God. That's what Job and David and others did when in anguish of heart, they questioned God. But mainland religion oftentimes is controlling and does not allow that. And so the philosophers did not have a true understanding of Christianity. And so they believed that religion was halting human progress. According to the philosophers, reason could be applied to all areas of life. And so reason starts to become their God versus the God of the Bible. Voltaire pushed for tolerance, freedom of speech, and religion. Even though Voltaire and most of these Enlightenment philosophers were not Christian, uh, they did believe in the freedom of speech and religion. As Voltaire would say, he would uh, die to protect your freedom of religion, even though he himself did not believe religion was a positive thing. In the Spirit of Laws, Montesquieu is going to discuss the importance of separation of powers. And so, as John Locke is the first one to really talk about the life, liberty, property, Montesquieu, he wants to protect those ideas as well, but he is hoping that revolution is not necessary. So he believed that if you separate those powers, such as the three branches of government, you have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. If you separate those powers, then you're going to have less corruption within the government. And that's what has helped America to thrive so long with our Constitution, that separation of powers. So Montesquieu, very important individual. Picture of old Montesquieu right there. Rousseau's The Social Contract suggests only good government is a direct democracy. So he believes that democracy, directly from the people voting, is the only type of good government. Rousseau, like Locke, believed in the consent of the governed, that absolute rulers and absolute monarchs and dictators are not the way to go, but it's the democracy and the representatives, the consent of the governed. Rousseau believes citizens, civilization, uh, people's natural goodness. So he believed, like Locke, that everybody was naturally good. So he believed that civilization corrupted people's natural goodness, um, but he did believe that people were born good, but then corrupted by society. Rousseau argued everyone was equal and that titles of nobility should be abolished. So this whole idea of you're born in a high class or you're born in a poor class, Rousseau disagreed with that because he believes in this idea of total equality. What are the legacies? Enlightenment ideas are going to inspire revolutions around the world. The first being the American Revolution, of course. But actually, before the American Revolution, you're also going to have the English Glorious Revolution in England, then the American Revolution, then the French Revolution, and all the other revolutions afterwards. Picture of the French Revolution right there. You're also going to have challenged concepts of monarchical rule. Throughout history, we've always had kings and queens as the rulers, but this Enlightenment is really going to change that and to propose that the people can rule. You're also going to have the encyclopedia, neoclassical style that is going to develop during this time period as people start to question not just science, but also the way things are done in life. Enlightenment is going to push for the abolishment of slavery and greater social equality, such as female equality with men. Belief in progress, a more secular outlook. Secular means non-religious, and so people are going to look to science and reason and not to God or the Bible as the reason for things. is going to be the rise of individualism, much like the Renaissance started to be more humanistic and focusing on human reason and human beauty. The Enlightenment is going to as well. Reason took the center stage during this time period. So you're going to have some people who will be born again Christians and also Enlightenment thinkers. However, the vast majority of these thinkers are going to be anti religious, and that's because they saw what was happening with the Roman Catholic Church and such, and the corruption there. So you don't need to write these down, but you have 5 attitudes about change. You have the reactionary, which resists change with force, looks to the past, typically could be more fanatical, racist, or religious, typically pro-military. But then you have conservative, which is less um, extreme on the right side, which opposes, actually on the left side here, opposes new ideas by peaceful and legal means, usually pro-government, pro-religion. But then you have moderate, people that are open to compromise in the middle, accept some change, but holds to certain traditions. And those moderates have been typically the majority of American voters. But then on the left, or on this, the right, you have liberal, which promotes new ideas. I don't like the word liberal as much because it's kind of misleading. I like the word progressive more because they're promoting or progressing new ideas by peaceful and legal means. They're typically anti-government, anti-religion. Radical, you're going to have change by force, looks to the new order, pro-revolution, and anti-religious. And so as you look at this group right here, you have extremes on both sides, um, but then you have moderate in the middle. And so Enlightenment thinkers would try to balance those different ideas. Now, somebody who's a reactionary, pro-military, does not necessarily mean that they're also racist, but if you get that extreme, that starts to be the tone. Same thing with radical. Just because somebody is liberal does not mean that they're anti-religion, but if you follow that train of thought, that's where it starts to take you. So if you are personally conservative or if you're personally liberal, make sure to beware of extremes because those take away from that understanding of compromise and balance. Thank you for taking these notes.